There are moments in life when you feel painfully outnumbered, like every challenge is 1,000 men deep and you're standing there with empty hands and trembling knees. And yet, there are times when God steps into that fear not to give you more strength, but to show you that His presence is already standing in the shadows beside you. And that is where we meet Gideon. Gideon's story begins in the hidden places, not on a battlefield but in a winepress where he threshes wheat in secret, trying to survive the cruelty of the Midianites. Israel is trapped in fear, living in caves, watching their harvest stolen year after year. But in that moment of isolation, the angel of the Lord appears to Gideon and calls him a mighty warrior, a title that feels like a cruel contrast to Gideon's reality. Yet God isn't speaking to who he is at that moment. He's speaking to what His presence will make him become. Gideon protests, questions, and wrestles with doubt, but God gives him a sign, then another, patiently guiding him into courage. As Gideon gathers an army to face the Midianite forces, God does something unusual. Instead of strengthening Gideon by increasing his power, God reduces it. 32,000 men shrink to 300. God strips Gideon of every illusion of human advantage so that Gideon learns to lean fully on divine guidance. Armed with trumpets, jars, and torches, tools that look more like props than weapons, Gideon and his tiny band move into battle under the cover of night. And when they break the jars and lift the torches, confusion fills the enemy camp, and God delivers victory in a way no one could claim as human brilliance. The story doesn't end with triumph alone. It continues with how God shapes Gideon's heart through obedience. The same man who once hid in fear now leads with a renewed sense of calling, realizing that courage is not the absence of anxiety, but the decision to follow God's voice, even when the odds look impossible. Gideon learns that the power of God is not measured in numbers, but in surrender. And through his journey, Israel sees that deliverance doesn't come from human confidence, but from the presence of God walking with the willing. Gideon's story invites us to face the places where fear tries to dictate our identity. Many of us live in our own winepress moments, hiding the parts of ourselves that feel small, weak, or overwhelmed. But God often meets us exactly there, not in our polished strength, but in our private uncertainty. His presence does not wait for us to be brave. It steps into our trembling and calls us what we do not yet see in ourselves. When God speaks identity over you, He is speaking from the perspective of who He crafted you to be, not who fear has convinced you that you are. It also teaches us that God removes our false securities not to shame us, but to free us from relying on what cannot save. When the crowds thin and the resources shrink, when the plans change and the support you counted on dissolves, it may not be a sign of defeat. It may be God reducing the noise so His strength can become unmistakable. The victories that change us most deeply are often the ones where we look back and whisper, "It could only have been God." That's what transforms faith from an idea into an anchor. And lastly, Gideon's journey reminds us that obedience is rarely glamorous. It can feel small, like breaking a jar or lifting a torch in the dark, unsure of what comes next. But simple obedience, partnered with the presence of the Holy Spirit, has the power to break strongholds we thought were too deeply rooted. When you move with God, even your smallest step becomes a signal of light in the night, disrupting the enemy's plans and making room for miracles that outshine your limitations. God is still calling ordinary people into extraordinary stories, not because they are fearless, but because they are willing. In the end, Gideon's life shows that courage is born in unlikely places, victory is shaped by God's presence rather than human strength, and transformation begins the moment we choose to believe what God says about us over what fear whispers. From the winepress to the battlefield, Gideon learned that God does not need large numbers or perfect confidence. He only needs surrendered hearts. And the same God who met him in his hiding place is ready to meet you in yours, turning your weakness into a doorway for His glory.